At Fissure Playground 2, Liquid had done something that we've never seen the current roster do. They not only looked pretty good, they actually won games. After an incredibly disappointing season of loss after loss after loss to teams like VP Prodigy and Sashi, they would completely flip the script to save their horrid season. With this one single tournament run, they now have enough VRS points to qualify for the Budapest Major. And it's all because of one of the strangest phenomenons in all of Counter-Strike, the dead team buff. After losing to Furia in the first match and going down 0-1, some news would break. Liquid's best player, Twist, was going back to FaZe Clan, an insane move that was announced just in the middle of a tournament, which had now effectively made this current Liquid roster a dead team. The tournament they were currently in would be the last dance with this roster. They then play Gamer Legion the next day and look completely atrocious. Now, with the team being 0-2, it looked like the morale was completely shot, but that's the magic of the dead team buff. If you're down 0-2 in a tournament, your team is dead, at the end of the day, really, who does care what happens? At this point, it seemed like the pressure was off, and we would finally see the potential of this Liquid roster right before they'd be destroyed. They win 3 games in a row, the last of which was against FaZe, the team Twist would be joining, and now have a spot in the playoffs. From 0-2 down looking hopeless, to locking the fuck in and winning 3 in a row. They then beat the number 5 team in the world, Aurora, 2-0 in the quarters. After this, they'd go on to play the number 1 ranked team in the world, Mongols, where they would go all 3 maps, but sadly lose 1-2. Here are Liquid's stats before the dead team buff, and here are their stats afterwards. Now listen, okay, I know they didn't go on to win this tournament, but you can tell how much better they seem to play when the pressure was off. And like, listen, the dead team buff isn't some sort of magical force, and I mean, it of course doesn't work for everyone. FaZe was a dead team at this tournament and they didn't make playoffs. I'm especially looking at you, G2 with Nico, but it does just kind of show the potential of teams and players when really the pressure is off. So it kind of does beg the question, how much of Counter-Strike is just all mental? I'd go to wager quite a bit, but that's a topic for a different day. Let's get into some more dead teams. Barmlings, do you like watching Counter-Strike? I would sure hope so, otherwise what are you doing here? Do you look at recent tournament winner Furia beating Bait and go, an obvious result? Do you need more excitement as you watch Liquid get curb stomped for the 12th time? If so, check out today's sponsor, ThunderPick. As a professional Counter-Strike yapper myself, I do like to put my money where my mouth is, so I've been personally using ThunderPick for a very long time. A part of the reason why is, look at all of these options. Straight up match winner, handicaps, total maps, exact score predictions, total rounds played in the series, and so much more. Along with this, they have in-depth statistics of everything you could possibly need to make the most informed pick. And honestly, what I love most about it is I am not only a Counter-Strike fan, but an NFL fan. Well, ThunderPick not only has every single esport imaginable, but also regular sports too. Football, basketball, baseball, hockey. I mean, they really do just have everything. And now you can deposit with not only crypto, but card, PayPal, Apple Pay, and pretty much any payment method that exists. Hit the link in the description for a 100% deposit bonus up to $600. And of course, guys, remember to bet safe. If I were you, I'd set a unit size, don't rage bet, all that stuff. Let's all try to get out of here with some money, eh? Anyways, back to the video. After winning the first major in Csgo, along with winning back-to-back majors in 2015, Fnatic would go on to have one of the goofiest years in their organization's history. 2016 would start with Olaf Meister needing to be temporarily benched due to wrist problems. And honestly, this is literally one of the worst things that can happen to an esports player. It would actually be better for both of your legs to be blown off. Anyways, this would take him out for about 2 months. Fnatic would go on to use 2 stand-ins during that time, and when Olaf eventually came back, he was still a great player, but I wouldn't say number 1 player of the year material anymore. But despite this unfortunate start, during most of 2016, Fnatic were still easily a top 3 team in the world. They'd win tier 1 events, make semifinals of a major, and consistently make playoffs of every event they attended. Well, this was until August 15th, where the team's core of Flusha, JW, and Crims would be sent off to Godsend to play with their old IGL they had won 3 majors with, Pronax. In return, Fnatic would get Twist and Lekro from Godsend and then add Wenton. This would plummet Fnatic's ranking from number 2 in the world all the way down to 67.
Guys, the real 6-7 kid is
Only 2 months later, though, Fnatic would go on to do another trade with Godsend, bringing back Crims for Lekro. This would allow them to retain their old core and regain their legend spot at the 2017 E-League Atlanta Major. Then in November, Wenton would be replaced by Disco Doppelin, and with the lineup of Disco Doppelin, Twist, Crims, Dennis, and Olaf Meister, Fnatic would play a couple online games for a DreamHack qualifier and ECS Season 2 Europe. They'd have mixed results, being the worst team in ECS, but making it through the DreamHack qualifier at least. Then boom, right at the start of 2017, this scuffed-ass fresh roster would have to play at a major. They'd go into the 2017 E-League Atlanta Major ranked as the number 20 team in the world, and like I said earlier, thank God they got Crims back, otherwise they might not even be here. But this roster being fresh and scuffed wasn't even the worst part. Prior to this major starting, there were actually rumors circulating that Fnatic wasn't even really going to give this roster a chance. Apparently they had already regretted the Godsend swap so much, they were going to revert the whole thing. The plan was to bring back Flusha and JW directly after this major ended. Because of this, it was also said the team had barely practiced going into this major because, honestly, why would they? The team's not going to last. They kind of just have to play this major as filler just because they're in it. And while that was the case for Fnatic and Godsend, they would both go into this tournament as completely dead teams. And for Fnatic, it looked like they were cooked directly off the bat. They would lose to G2 16-10. But then after going down 0-1, they would rattle off 3 wins in a row against North, Mouse, and Envy to then make the playoffs. During these 3 wins, Olafmeister would of course lock in, along with Crims and Twist. They had already overachieved to make it this far, but now that they were in the playoffs, there was no doubt they were completely playing with house money. Then, in their quarterfinal match against Gambit, it wouldn't be an Olafmeister or a Crims masterclass. It would be the player who was leaving directly after the event, Twist. He'd drop a 1.29 rating and push Fnatic to a major semifinals. For Fnatic terms, a major semifinal isn't anything crazy impressive. I mean, they just made the semis of the last one. But considering the team's situation, considering they hadn't really practiced going into this, yeah, I'd say this is a pretty insane result. The players were basically just out here pugging, man. Just playing CS with no thoughts, no pressure. And I mean, it was working. But unfortunately, in the semis, they would play Astralis, where they would actually go into OT map 1, but ultimately lose 0-2. Astralis would then go on to win the entire thing. Then 6 days after the event ended, Fnatic would bring back JW and Flusha and send Twist and Disco Doppelin back to Godsend. Honestly, a cool dead team run, but it's sad they couldn't win the whole thing. If only there was a dead team who could win the entire thing. I'm not going to go too heavily into this because I want to get into some more recent dead team runs as well. And I mean, the Cloud9 Boston run has to be one of the most yapped about majors of all time. So I'm sure you've heard enough about it. I talk about it in at least one video every few months. You know, they beat the FaZe Super Team in the final. They were down 0-2 in the groups, came back to make the playoffs. But what you might not know is they were basically a dead team going into this major. Thanks to an interview with Cloud9 CEO Jack Etienne, we got a ton of insight into what happened before and right after this major run. Jack would go on to state, "We had our fair share of struggles even approaching this event. We knew we were a good team, but there were also these underlying issues and fractures I saw in the team already before this event. I think Skadoodle was already looking to take a bit of a break, so for him to reach that pinnacle right as he was looking to take a break was really well timed. It felt really good to see these guys come together and win such an epic event in such an incredible way. But quickly after, and I'm talking from the moment we took this picture to the time we got to the shuttle to head back to the hotel, the fractures were evident. So it sounds like before this event even started, Skadoodle was looking to take a break. And along with this, there were kind of severe underlying issues with the team that would continue even right after they would win. Even after winning, there were players that were upset. They didn't feel like they were getting the recognition they should, and there was already a huge cloud over the future of the team. I think the fact that we lasted just a few months after this event was really just because we won the event. Had we not won, it would have been an immediate change. I wasn't in the room, but apparently from what I've been told, Automatic and Stewie were both offered opportunities to go to MIBR. Automatic wanted to stick with Cloud9 and what we were working on, and Stewie was interested. He hugely respected the players who were a part of MIBR, and he wanted to see what it was like to play in a system with Fallen. I'm not exactly sure when this offer for Stewie and Automatic came in, but it seems like the players on the team, Stewie in particular, had issues with the team prior to the Boston Major. And when you include that he knew Skadoodle was planning to take a break, it makes sense that he would consider wanting to leave. And I mean, this does track, because only 2 months after that major win, Stewie would leave for SK, and on the same day, Skadoodle would announce he's stepping down from the roster. Just like Jack had said, I bet if they don't win Boston, these moves probably happen directly after the major. So it really does make you wonder, If there weren't cracks within the team leading up to Boston, does NA still never have a major win? Was Cloud9's victory partially because of a dead team buff? Two of their most important players planning to not be there after the event, which ultimately would take the pressure off of them and every single other player on the team. Listen, man, it's tough to say, but you could absolutely argue if Cloud9 didn't have these underlying issues going into the major, the miraculous run might have never happened. Now, for a few more examples that have happened more recently in CS2, you guys remember that Saw run at PGL Cluj-Napoca? After losing their two best players in Eras Dose and U-Jerks, Saw wouldn't look like anything they had at their peak when they made the semis of IEM Cologne. This would cause the team to make a fairly quick change, benching SHR and Roman. SHR had just joined the team in December of 2024, and after 2 short months with the team, Saw decided they had had enough. Roman, on the other hand, has been playing with Muterus for 70 years, so it was a bit of a more tragic benching, but he also absolutely did have to get benched. After news of these benchings, Saw would go into PGL Bucharest as one of the favorites to go 0-3. They didn't really look that good prior to this, and I mean, the roster was fried. But of course, we should have known better. After going down 0-2 and looking like they would absolutely be 0-3, Story and SHR would lock the fuck in and power Saw to 3 straight wins.
Someone cooked here.
These dead teams love to do exactly this. They love to go down 0-2, make everyone think they're cooked, they're just a dead team, and then the dead team buff kicks in. During that 3-win stretch, Story would post a 1.29 rating and SHR a 1.16, easily his best performance on the team. Sadly, they would get knocked out of the quarters by FaZe 2-0, but I would say it was a fairly nice send-off for Roman and SHR, especially because in that last series against FaZe, Roman would have the highest rating on the team. Thank you, boys, for your last stand performances. Speaking of PGL events, what if a dead team buff all came together and forged itself into one player? The only trophy on Falcons' entire HLTV page was courtesy of the almighty dead team buff. Before PGL Bucharest would start, it was all but confirmed m0NESY would be leaving G2 to join Falcons. It was fairly shocking at the time, but his husband was on the team, so it makes sense. But that would mean the offer for Falcons, Dexter, would unfortunately be on the chopping block. He'd been fine on Falcons, but it's m0NESY, so what are you gonna do? Falcons would go on to do the classic dead team maneuver, losing the first 2 games looking god awful. I mean, they looked like the worst tier 1 team in existence during these 2 games. I cannot overstate how horrible they were. But then, like all of their dead team forefathers, they would suddenly lock in and win 3 games in a row to make the playoffs. During their 3-game stretch of wins, Nico would post a 1.39, Dexter a 1.21, and Tessez a 1.2. They then get revenge on Gamer Legion and beat FaZe to make the finals, where they would play another dead team in G2. One of the goofiest finals of all time, genuinely, come on. Falcons would go on to beat G2 3-0, and the man who would be getting replaced in Dexter would be Falcons' highest rated player throughout the playoffs and receive the event MVP. He had just cooked the man who was replacing him as a last hurrah. I truly wouldn't even call this a dead team buff at this point. It really was a dead player buff. Dexter just absolutely locked in during this event. Honestly though, man, props to him. This is one hell of a send-off. The last dead team buff I want to talk about is kind of similar to the Dexter Falcon situation, but sadly it's not as epic. At the 2025 Esports World Cup, Heroic and Spirit would be playing each other in the first match. The format of this tournament was ridiculous. It was just a giant single elim bracket, so whoever lost this game would just be knocked out. And well, prior to this, it was rumored that Heroic's best player and Rookie of the Year candidate in Tanir would be leaving to replace Zontix on Spirit. That would make this series more interesting than it had any right to be. And well, it was not only interesting, it would go all 3 maps, and Spirit would lose to Heroic on the 3rd map in OT. And what makes this even crazier, it's not like Spirit was just some decent team. They had won the last 2 tournaments in a row in honestly fairly dominant fashion. Since losing their coach Saw, Heroic looked incredibly mediocre. They had no right to win this game. Heroic and Tanir would get the dead team buff, while it seemed like Spirit would get the dead team debuff. It's also a real thing. Honestly, Spirit looked completely out of whack in this game, and Tanir crushed them with a 1.21 rating. And to add even more onto this, with Heroic looking mediocre since losing their coach, they also had a brand new AWPer they had just brought in Alcarin. But I mean, the team got to play loose. They got to play free with, no stress. The roster is dead after literally probably this game. and they cook spirit. It's genuinely insane the powers that the dead team buff has. Sure, you can go in against a top 2 team in the world that had just won 2 events in a row, but like, you have absolutely no business winning this game. When your mental is locked in, when you simply don't care, you play with no fear, it's absolutely insane the upsets that you can do. So going back to what I said earlier, how much of Counter-Strike is mental, I know I could make an entire other video on it. I think the dead team buff is proof that it might be more of a factor than people really think. If you're getting teams with no business winning any games, upsetting some of the best teams in the world, mental might be 70% of like what goes into games. That's why players who don't get nervous, don't freak out like a donk, are so unbelievable. Because if you can keep your mental in check always, it's like you always have a dead team buff, and that shit's powerful, man. Anyways, that's it from me, Smellies. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please liking the video. Please subscribing to me, notificationing on, and I'll see you guys next weekend.